He was the most watched leading man on television. Millions loved him, networks fought to keep him. Laurie was offered more money than almost any actor in history. He said no to it all, then he did something that shocked everyone. He spent over a decade refusing to even speak about the show. No podcasts, no interviews, no nostalgia, just silence. The official story was about ratings and contracts. But the real reason House ended has nothing to do with television networks and everything to do with a man who built an empire and lost himself in the process. Before House, Hugh Laurie was successful. He had a career people respected. He acted, he wrote, he made music. He was known in Britain, comfortable in that smaller spotlight. Then something shifted. In 2004, medical drama landed on Fox. Nobody expected what would happen next. The show was about a doctor, not a nice one, a man who limped through hospitals with a cane, addicted to pills, sarcastic to the point of cruelty, and somehow brilliant enough to save lives nobody else could touch. Laurie played him. By 2007, something extraordinary occurred. The show became the most watched series on television, not just in America, everywhere. In that single year, Laurie entered the Guinness Book of World Records. The title read like a prediction of what was coming. Most watched leading man on television. It wasn't an award you could put on a shelf. It was a weight. Millions of people tuned in each week specifically to watch him, not the show him. The pressure of that kind of attention is difficult to explain unless you have actually lived it. Every choice he made as an actor mattered to people he would never meet. Every line he delivered would be analyzed. Every expression would be dissected. The money came next. By the final seasons, Laurie was earning around $700,000 per episode. That number sits in your mind differently when you really think about it. $700,000 per episode. For that kind of money, networks expected everything. They expected him to show up. They expected perfection. They expected him to be available, present, committed beyond the point where most humans can actually sustain commitment. He was in virtually every scene of every episode. That means he was on set for 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day. That was his routine. That was his life. Success had transformed from something beautiful into something that resembled a cage. The cage just happened to be made of money and fame instead of bars. He had gotten exactly what actors dream of: international recognition, critical acclaim, wealth beyond what he had imagined. Golden Globe nominations year after year. He won them, the industry loved him, the world loved him. But somewhere in the middle of all that love and success and money, something was breaking inside him that nobody could see from the audience. The question that hung over everything was simple but impossible to answer. How long could a human being sustain this? How many more seasons could he push? How much more could he give? Here is what most people do not understand about making a television show. It is not like making a film. A film takes weeks or months, then it is finished. A television show never finishes. It devours time in a way that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has never lived it. House filmed in Los Angeles. Laurie is British, his wife is British. His 3 children were born and raised in London. That meant for 8 years. 9 months out of every year, he lived 6,000 miles away from his family. Think about that distance for a moment, not as a number, as a reality. He would wake up in Los Angeles and his children would be asleep in London. By the time they woke up, his filming day had already begun. By the time his day ended, they were already asleep again. He missed bedtimes. He missed school runs. He missed the ordinary moments that make up a childhood. One interview. He said something that revealed the weight of it. I have missed bath times and dentist appointments. He said it casually, like it was nothing, but it was everything. Those small moments are what a life actually is. They are not replaceable. They cannot be paused and resumed later. The back and forth was relentless. Laurie would spend 9 months in Los Angeles, then fly home for a few weeks, then fly back again. The cycle repeated for 8 years, every season. His body was in 2 places but never fully present in either one. He existed in airports and hotel rooms and on airplanes. The jet lag alone would wear down a person over time. But the jet lag was the smallest problem. The real problem was the separation, the emotional distance that grows when you are not there for the daily rhythms of your family's life. Laurie later admitted something that revealed how much the pressure was affecting him. He became depressed, clinically. Not the sadness that comes from a bad day, real depression. The kind that changes how you see the world, how you move through it, how you wake up in the morning. He was living in what he described as a cage, not a cage made of walls. A cage made of cameras and lights and people wanting pieces of him. Los Angeles itself became a prison. He could not go to a coffee shop. He could not walk down a street. The paparazzi were always looking. The fans were always watching. He said it felt like he was living in a cage in Los Angeles, thousands of miles from the people he loved, unable to leave even for a day without being recognized, photographed, followed. The money kept coming, the accolades kept coming. The show kept climbing, but something inside him was breaking in ways that success could not fix. He was becoming trapped by the very thing that had made him famous. What nobody knew was that he was thinking about ending it. The question was not whether he could keep going. The question was whether he should. By 2011, House was still drawing millions of viewers. The show had not collapsed, the ratings had dipped from their peak. But television networks would have killed for numbers like that. 8.5 million viewers, that is an enormous audience. Yet Fox had a problem. The show was expensive, very expensive. They were spending $5 million per episode. That sounds impossible until you realize what that money actually pays for: salaries, equipment, sets, crew, special effects, insurance. All of it adds up quickly when you are producing a show that shoots for months every year. Fox wanted to renegotiate. They wanted to lower what they were paying for the license to broadcast House. They wanted to cut costs. That meant less money for the production, less money for everyone involved. Laurie was the highest paid actor on the show. The negotiations became tense. What happened next revealed something about Laurie that surprised industry insiders. He was willing to take a pay cut. Let that sink in for a moment. He was one of the most successful actors in the world. He was making $700,000 per episode, and he was willing to make less money if it meant keeping the show alive. Why would he do that? The answer was not about money. He had enough money. He had more money than he could spend in multiple lifetimes. The reason was more complicated. Part of him still believed in the show. Part of him still wanted to finish the story the right way. Part of him was terrified that if House ended, he would have to confront what his life had actually become. As long as the show was still going, he could keep moving, he could keep pushing. He did not have to stop and look around at the wreckage. But the negotiations collapsed anyway. Fox and Universal could not reach an agreement. The studios wanted different things. The production company wanted different things. Laurie wanted something else entirely. Nobody's needs aligned anymore. The machine that had been running for 8 years started to grind to a halt. In February 2012, Laurie, the show's creator David Shore, and executive producer Katie Jacobs released a statement. They said the decision was painful. They said they had deliberated for a long time. They said the 8th season would be the last. But there is something important hidden in that statement. It was framed as a creative choice. They said they wanted to end the show while House remained an enigmatic creature. They said they wanted to finish while the character still had mystery. That language sounds noble. It sounds like artists making a principled decision about their work. And maybe it was partly that, but it was also something else. It was a way of ending things that preserved dignity. It was Laurie and Shore and Jacobs announcing an ending on their terms instead of waiting for the networks to cancel them or force them to continue. The truth beneath the official story was darker and more human. The show was ending because the system had broken down. The negotiations had failed, the money did not work anymore, and most importantly, the man at the center of it all was drowning. What Hugh Laurie never said publicly, but what became clear in the years after, was that he was at the absolute limit of what he could endure. By the final season, something physical was happening to his body. He had played Gregory House for so long, embodied the character so completely that the line between actor and role had blurred. House limped because of a leg injury. Laurie had been limping on set for 8 years. By the end, he was limping off set too, not because the script required it, because his body had internalized the character so deeply that he could not stop. That is what happens when you live inside a character for that long. You do not simply play them, you become them. The cynicism seeps into your real life. The exhaustion becomes your baseline, the pain becomes normal. Laurie's colleagues on set noticed he was different by season 8. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He was going through the motions, but something essential had left him. The spark was still there, but it was dimmer, the weight was heavier. One of the most revealing things Laurie has ever said came years later. He admitted that he is someone who tends to self-sabotage. He said if he does not have a stone in his shoe, he will put one there. That statement reveals a man who is uncomfortable with comfort, who creates problems because problems feel more real than peace. During House, he did not need to create stones. The show provided them. The separation from his family was a stone. The depression was a stone. The cage of Los Angeles was a stone. The endless work was a stone. He was walking through life with pockets full of stones. The final season aired in 2012. When Laurie watched the last episode, something shifted inside him. He had spent 8 years playing a man who was fundamentally alone, who pushed everyone away, who could not let people close to him. He had lived that character's isolation in his real life, 6,000 miles from his family, locked in a city where he could not walk freely, trapped in a role that had consumed him completely. The line between performance and reality had become so thin that it was almost invisible. In interviews during that period, Laurie said playing House had been an unforgettable part of his life. He meant it. He was proud of the work. He knew what he had accomplished was something special, but he also knew that the cost had been extraordinary. The price had been paid in years away from his children, in depression, in a kind of loneliness that money cannot touch, in becoming so identified with a character that he could barely remember who he was underneath. When the show ended, Laurie made a decision that would define everything that came after. He decided he was done. not just done with House. Done with the machinery of television, done with the pace that had nearly destroyed him, done with performing at that level of intensity. He would do other things, he would make music, he would write novels, he would pursue projects that interested him. But he would never again surrender his life to a television show the way he had to House. That decision meant something else too. It meant he would never really want to talk about House again, because talking about it meant going back to that place. It meant reliving the pain and the sacrifice. It meant explaining to people why the thing that had made him famous had also nearly broken him. What happened next was unprecedented in the entertainment industry. A man played the most iconic television character of his generation. He won Golden Globes, he was nominated for 6 consecutive years, the show won Emmys, it became a cultural phenomenon, and then he just stopped talking about it. Completely for over a decade, Hugh Laurie refused to engage with House in any meaningful way. No reunion specials, no nostalgic interviews, no behind-the-scenes stories, nothing. When podcasters reached out, he declined. When streaming services wanted him to reflect on the show's legacy, he said no. When fans asked questions, his representatives gave polite but firm refusals. In 2024, medical podcaster named Dr. Mike Varshavsky tried to invite Laurie to discuss his time on House. The response came back swift and clear. Laurie's staff delivered a message that was blunt and almost shocking in its honesty. He was not interested in opportunities like that. He frankly did not care about the audience. He did not want to relive the show. That statement landed differently than a typical celebrity decline. It was not diplomatic. It was not wrapped in gratitude for the opportunity or appreciation for the fans. It was direct, brutal. It revealed something about how deeply the experience had affected him. The man who had played one of television's greatest characters had moved on so completely that the thought of going back seemed almost painful. But here is what makes this even more interesting. When Laurie's statement became public, his representatives actually pushed back slightly. They said he had never said he would never do House again. They suggested the message might have been misrepresented. Yet Laurie himself did not clarify, he did not defend himself. He did not explain, he just let the silence continue. That silence says more than any explanation could. Some people pointed out the irony. House was a character defined by pushing people away, by being difficult, by refusing to engage with sentiment or nostalgia. Laurie's response to being asked about House was perfectly in character. It was as if he had become the role so completely that he could not escape it even years later. The misanthropy was no longer an act, it was just who he had become. In the years after House ended, Laurie pursued music seriously. He released albums, he wrote a novel, he appeared in select film and television projects. But on his own terms, in his own time, he stepped back from the machinery of Hollywood. He spent time with his family in London. He healed from the depression that had gripped him during those 8 years slowly. He rebuilt a life that looked like it belonged to him instead of to a television network. But the refusal to talk about House became a kind of monument to what the show had cost him. It was not anger. It was not bitterness exactly. It was something deeper. It was a man drawing a line and refusing to cross it. It was saying without saying it that part of my life nearly destroyed me, and I am not going back there, not even to remember it fondly, not even to celebrate what we accomplished. The cost was too high, and some doors once closed need to stay closed. The silence became louder than any interview could have been. The real story behind House's cancellation was never about ratings dropping or networks fighting over money. Those things happened, yes, but they were symptoms, not the disease. The real story was about a man who had given everything to a role and discovered that everything was not enough to sustain the human cost. The official narrative said the show ended because Fox and Universal could not agree on terms. Technically true. But the deeper truth was that Hugh Laurie could not agree with himself anymore about whether continuing was worth it. When Laurie and the producers announced the end in February 2012, they framed it as a choice made from a position of strength. They said they wanted to end while the show still had life. They said they wanted to preserve the mystery of the character. That was all true, but it was also a choice made because the alternative was worse. The alternative was Laurie breaking completely. The alternative was a man who had already lost 8 years to depression and separation, finally reaching the point where he could not do it anymore. What makes this story so powerful is that it reveals something most people never see about success. Success is not always what it looks like from the outside. Money does not solve loneliness. Fame does not cure depression. Accolades do not bring back the years you missed with your children. Laurie achieved everything an actor is supposed to want. He got there and discovered that the prize was hollow. The journey there had cost him pieces of himself that no amount of success could restore. The silence that followed was not an accident. It was intentional. It was a boundary. Laurie was saying to the world, I survived this, I got through it. But I am not going back, not for nostalgia, not for celebration, not even for the fans who loved the show. The show that made him famous had almost unmade him as a human being. The price was 8 years away from his family, clinical depression, the loss of anonymity, the feeling of living in a cage. Those are not things you can talk about lightly over a podcast, years later. Laurie has spoken about his approach to work differently. He has said that he likes to put stones in his shoe to create problems, to find discomfort, but he has also learned to stop. He has learned that there is a difference between pushing yourself and destroying yourself. House taught him that lesson in the harshest possible way. It taught him that success can be a trap if you're not careful, that fame can be a prison, that money cannot buy back time. The people who worked on House, the producers and writers and crew, they believed they were making something that would last. They were right. House will always be remembered. Laurie's performance will always be studied and celebrated. The show changed television, but the cost to the man at the center of it all was extraordinary, and when you really understand that cost, when you stop looking at the headlines and the ratings and the money and you look instead at what Laurie lost, the silence makes perfect sense. He is not angry at House. He is not bitter about his time on the show. He is simply a man who paid a price that was too high and decided never to pay it again. The refusal to talk about it, the decade of silence, the blunt rejection of interview requests, all of it is his way of protecting himself. It is his way of saying, I survived this, and I will not let it pull me back inches. The real story behind House's cancellation is a story about a man choosing his life back over his career. It is about recognizing that some doors, once they close, should stay closed. It is about understanding that the greatest achievement is not winning awards or breaking records. It is surviving the cost of those achievements and choosing to live differently afterward. Hugh Laurie paid the price for being the most watched leading man on television, and he decided it was a price he would never pay again.